What would you do if you found Bigfoot and he was bleeding like a human? In the middle of a vast, snowy wilderness, a creature of legend doesn't roar or attack. It looks at you with eyes full of pain and fear and silently begs to live. Here's the truth no one tells you. Bigfoot isn't the monster. We are. It's not bullets that are killing him. It's our fear, our ignorance, and our refusal to see the human in what we don't understand. This story is based on a modern fable, inspired by decades of myth and the very real loneliness of a man who once believed in miracles. In just 7 minutes, this film will challenge the way you treat others, and even yourself. It's about what happens when a grieving war veteran and a hunted creature meet in silence and choose empathy over fear. A story where a single campfire and one quiet gesture speak louder than history. If you've ever felt alone, if you've ever wished you could go back and do something differently, don't skip this, because sometimes the chance to be human doesn't come twice. No one came up Cold Pine Ridge unless they were lost, running from something, or too stubborn to turn back. The gravel crackled under the weight of old tires. Trees leaned in close, and the deeper you went, the more the world behind you felt like a lie you once believed in. Somewhere at the edge of that forgotten road, tucked behind a splintered fence and half swallowed by the woods, sat a cabin. Shingle roof caved in on one side. Front porch slanted like a broken jaw. No mailbox, no signs, just the sound of wind moving through pine needles, like someone whispering secrets in a language older than guilt. That's where Harlan Stroud lived. He didn't believe in redemption. Not anymore. It had been 23 years since the accident. The rain had come down hard that night, soaked the pavement outside Beau's Tavern, washed out the stars, and he'd still gotten behind the wheel. Still turned the key. Still told his boy to buckle up like it was gonna help. The whiskey on his breath, the sound of the guardrail screaming under steel. Those things came back in dreams. The rest never really left. Harlan wasn't a bad man, but he was the kind of man who learned too late how to love the right way. That kind of mistake sticks to you. It colors the way you walk, the way you breathe, the way you stay quiet long after everyone stopped asking why. Each morning before the sun hit the treetops, Harlan walked the same path down to the creek, one hand in his jacket pocket, the other brushing pine branches aside. The woods knew him, knew the rhythm of his boots, the sound of his cough, the smell of the stale tobacco he never lit. He didn't hunt, didn't fish. He just walked. Sometimes he'd stop and speak to the trees. Just a few words, barely louder than breath. And if someone had been close enough to hear, they might have sworn the trees leaned in to listen. October the 2nd, 1989. Frost came early. Found a bird frozen stiff in the trough. Thought about digging a hole for it. Didn't. Not sure if I'm becoming part of this place, or if it's becoming part of me. Inside the cabin, things stayed where they'd always been. The boots by the door, still caked with the last winter's mud. The photo on the mantel. Rachel's smile faded to blue-gray. A cracked cup that always caught the rain from the leaky roof. And the wood stove, its iron belly cold most nights. Harlan didn't need much. Just quiet, just distance, just enough time to forget how much time he'd wasted. That night, the wind carried something different. It moved low across the ridge, rattling the window frames like bony fingers. The fire had died down. Harlan sat in his usual spot by the stove, coat still on, cup of black coffee gone lukewarm in his grip. Across from him was the other chair, the one no one sat in anymore. Still, he poured a second cup. "Evenin'," he muttered. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It felt watchful. He stood, took the old lantern from the hook, and stepped onto the porch. The night was moonless, thick, the kind of dark that felt heavy on your chest. Somewhere in the trees, a branch cracked, slow, deliberate, like weight shifting from one foot to another. He stayed still. Just the wind, maybe a buck, maybe nothing. But something didn't sit right. The forest had a rhythm to it. And tonight, it felt offbeat. The next morning he found them, dense in the frost. Not human, not deer, toes, long, spread like fingers, deep, like whatever made them carried a weight the earth didn't know how to hold. He knelt beside them, ran his calloused fingers along the edge of one. Cold, real, not a trick of light or dream. They led from the tree line to the side of the cabin, then back into the woods. But there were no drag marks, no blood, just the footprints, like quiet thoughts stamped into the frozen ground. He didn't tell anyone. Who'd listen? October 3rd, 1989. Heard something in the trees last night. Not a bear. Didn't sound afraid. Neither was I. Found tracks this morning, big ones, real as anything. I should be worried. I'm not. God help me, I think I've been waiting. Harlan stopped going into town. Not that he had much reason before. The store clerk down at Harlan's Supply stopped asking questions after the 3rd year. People around Cold Pine knew enough to leave well enough alone. They remembered the crash. They remembered the funeral. And they remembered how Harlan Stroud didn't cry, just stood there like a statue they forgot to take down. But the woods remembered something else. Over the next few days, he heard more. The sound of something moving just beyond the brush, a shape through the mist, tall, still, like a stump that hadn't been there before. Sometimes he'd feel it watching, not hunting, not curious, just remembering. One evening he stood at the edge of the creek and whispered, "What are you?" The wind didn't answer, but the trees stopped swaying for a moment, and somewhere beyond the ridge, a low breath echoed back. Not growl, not call, breath, measured, like his own. Harlan walked back slower than usual that night. At the porch, he paused, looked back. The path behind him held no prints. Inside, he lit the stove, poured 2 cups, and set them down. His hands didn't shake like they used to. He didn't feel old. He felt alert. Outside, the shadows pooled together. A shape moved through them, slower than wind, heavier than memory, and just as silent. Harlan didn't look up. He just whispered, "I know you're there." Nothing answered. But across from him, the 2nd cup of coffee steamed a little longer than it should have. The cold had thickened overnight. Not the kind that brushed the skin and faded, but the kind that settled into bones, into silence, into the wood of the cabin and the cracks of an old man's spine. Harlan woke before the sun, as always. But the air didn't welcome him that morning. It warned. The wind was tighter somehow, compressed between the pine trunks like a lung-holding breath. The sky hadn't broken yet, just hovered there like slate waiting to fall. He dressed slow, 1 boot at a time. Same coat, same gloves. He filled the thermos with lukewarm coffee and tucked the hunting knife into the belt behind his hip, though he didn't hunt anymore. Hadn't in years. He told himself it was for cutting bark, but there were days it felt like armor. He took the east trail, the one that cut deeper into the ridge, past the stream, and into the denser part of the forest where the trees grew close enough to block memory. It was the same path he'd taken yesterday and the day before. But that morning, something was different. His boots hit the snow and didn't echo. The birds weren't singing, and the pines were still. Too still. It started with a line of blood, thin, crisp against the white like someone had drawn it with a razor. It wasn't much at first, just a smear across a patch of moss. But then came another, and another. Drops at first, then smears, then a trail, winding through the underbrush, ducking beneath branches like something trying not to be followed but too hurt to hide well. Harlan crouched. The air here had weight. Even the silence had weight. He reached out and touched the nearest red blotch with 2 fingers. Still tacky. Still warm. He looked up, followed the line of blood, and saw it. It was lying at the base of a ridge, half covered in branches that looked placed, not fallen. A crude attempt at camouflage. A trap hidden in desperation. The shape was too large to be a deer. It wasn't a bear either. Too long. The chest rose and fell, barely, but it was breathing. Harlan stepped closer, slowly, quietly. His breath formed clouds that dissolved before they reached the shape. He didn't need to guess what it was. The body was covered in dark hair, thick and tangled, matted with blood and dirt and pine needles. One massive arm was twisted awkwardly beneath it, caught in the jaws of a rusted steel bear trap. Muscles trembled in the cold. The face, partially hidden, turned just enough for him to see one eye. It opened. They looked at each other. No fear, no rage, just exhaustion. A weight in that gaze he hadn't seen since the funeral. A kind of sadness that didn't beg to be rescued, just understood. Harlan didn't move for a long time. The cold bit at his neck, slid down his spine. Somewhere deep inside, something told him to turn around. Let it die. Let nature do what nature does. But he stayed. The creature didn't growl, didn't lunge. It exhaled, a low, wet breath, and closed its eye again, as if saying, "Do what you will. I'm already gone." October 5th, 1989. It's real. I'm not crazy. I'm not drunk. I'm not hallucinating. It's real. And it's dying. And for reasons I can't explain, I can't leave it. The trap was old. The kind Clyde Rucker used. Harlan knew the make. He'd seen them behind Rucker's shed, hanging like mouths waiting to bite. Harlan's jaw clenched. He grabbed a branch and wedged it between the trap's jaws. It took 3 tries. The metal was slick with blood and frost. But on the 4th push, the teeth groaned apart with a rusty snap. The creature didn't move, didn't cry out, just breathed heavier. Maybe it was shock, maybe resignation. Harlan didn't know, but he couldn't leave it there. He built a makeshift sled from a fallen sapling and his coat. Wrapped the creature in it, careful not to look too long at its wounds. He lashed the limbs tight, left enough room for breath. Then he dragged, inch by inch, his boots carving tracks in the snow. His back screamed, his fingers went numb. He didn't think, he just pulled. It took most of the day to reach the edge of the clearing near the cabin. The sun had already begun to dip, casting long shadows across the snow like stretched limbs. The cabin stood like it always had, indifferent to his choices. But tonight, it would witness something new. He didn't bring the creature inside. He didn't dare. Instead, he opened the old stable, half-rotted, smelling of mold and ash, and laid the body on a pile of hay. He covered it in old blankets and lit a single lantern, placing it near but not close enough to burn. Then he sat in the corner and waited. The creature didn't wake that night, but it didn't die either. October 6th, 1989. I saw its eyes again when I closed mine. Not beast eyes, not predator, just tired. I think it knows I won't hurt it. Hell, I think it knew before I did. Morning came with wind. Harder this time. Harsher. Harlan brought water in a tin dish. It didn't drink, not yet. But it stirred. A twitch of fingers, a shift of weight. Enough to know it wasn't gone. He cleaned the wound. Slow. Careful. The arm was swollen, skin torn and raw where the trap had cut deep. Infection was likely. He had no medicine, just an old bottle of iodine and a flask of whiskey he hadn't touched in 7 years. He used both. The creature jerked when the liquid hit, but didn't retaliate. Its breathing steadied after. The sun never really rose that day, just brightened the gray a little. Harlan worked in silence. Only the wind answered. That night, as he sat by the stove, he heard a noise. Not from outside, from the stable. He stood, heart pounding harder than it had in years, and opened the door slowly. Cold poured in like smoke. He grabbed the lantern, boots crunching snow, and stepped inside. The creature was awake, propped on one elbow, staring at him. Between them, lying neatly on the hay, was his hat. The one he'd lost in the woods 2 days ago. He didn't speak. He couldn't. He just stepped forward, picked up the hat, and nodded. Outside, the wind began to move again. And far off, barely heard, something else answered. The storm broke in the early hours, but it wasn't the kind that came with thunder. It was the slow, creeping kind, the one that crept in through the roof boards and settled in a man's chest like grief left too long. By sunrise, the snow had melted into mud around the stable. The trees hung heavy, still dripping, as if the whole forest had taken a breath and forgot how to exhale. Harlan sat just outside the stall with a tin plate of canned beans gone cold in his lap. The creature hadn't moved much since the night before, but its eyes followed him now, slow and steady, like it was trying to read him backward. It didn't speak. Didn't need to. There was something in its breathing, measured, reluctant, almost deliberate. Not wounded animal breath, not wild panic breath. Something closer to how a man breathes when he's waiting to die, but keeps waking up anyway. The wound looked worse in daylight. Swollen deep red and lined with grime. The trap had torn straight through muscle, maybe nicked the bone. The skin around it was going gray. It should have howled in pain, should have swatted him away when he came with the iodine again, but it just laid there, watching, enduring, like it was no stranger to agony. Harlan dipped a rag into warm water, wrung it out, and pressed it to the wound. He could feel it twitch under his hand, a spasm like lightning running down the arm. The creature didn't flinch, didn't growl. Its gaze fixed somewhere beyond him, out past the wood wall, past the trees. It was remembering something. Harlan knew that look. He'd seen it in the mirror. He worked through the morning. Boiled snow for water. Dug through an old tackle box until he found 2 painkillers he'd forgotten he had. Ground them up. Mixed them into mashed carrots from a dented can. Watched as the creature sniffed, blinked, then slowly took it in. Bit by bit. He didn't expect trust. He didn't even expect understanding. But when the creature let its arm rest against his knee that afternoon, just for a breath, Harlan felt something shift. Not in it, in him. October 7th, 1989. This thing, it's not just alive. It's aware. It watches the fire, follows my voice. Took food from my hand today. It isn't tame, and it sure as hell isn't safe. But it's not lost either. Not wild, not civilized. Just waiting for something. Maybe I am too. That night the wind came back louder. It howled through the cracks in the stable and tapped the glass of the lantern like it was trying to get in. Harlan sat beside the stall, coat pulled tight, eyes open longer than they should have been. The creature slept, curled slightly, arm bandaged with a ripped sheet and a belt. It had started to hum in its chest, low, rhythmic, like the sound of a cave breathing. Not a song, not pain, just presence. Harlan closed his eyes for just a second. When he opened them, the stable door was ajar. He sat up, heart hammering against ribs that hadn't held weight like this in years. The snow outside was thin, patchy, enough to show prints. There were none. The creature was still there. But something else was too. The smell came first. Metallic, sour, the way the wood smelled after something bled out nearby. Harlan reached for the lantern and lifted it toward the rafters. On the top beam, wedged into the rotting wood, was a piece of steel. A tooth. Not natural. Old. Rusted. With letters carved in it. CR. His breath froze in his chest. Clyde Rucker. The trap had a name. Not a model number. Not a stamp. Clyde had carved it into the metal himself. As if proud of the thing, Harlan stared at it, then at the creature. That night, he couldn't sleep. He laid the trap out on the cabin floor, turned it over in his hands, saw the dried blood in the grooves, ran his finger across the carved initials. Remembered Clyde grinning in the bar 10 years back, talking about things that don't belong in our woods, things that needed correcting. Harlan hadn't said anything then, hadn't said anything about a lot of things. He wrapped the trap in burlap and walked out into the cold. The creek was running thin, frozen on the edges. He dropped the trap in and watched it sink, slow, like guilt going to rest. The water swallowed it whole. October 8th, 1989. I can't stop thinking about how it looked at me when I came back from the creek. Like it knew what I'd done. Like it approved. Like it was grateful. I didn't think anything out here still knew how to forgive. The next morning he found the creature sitting up. Not standing, not walking, but upright. Eyes clearer, breathing stronger. Its head turned slowly when Harlan entered, and it reached, clumsy, unsure, and took the cup from his hand. They sat like that for an hour. Two beings that should have never crossed paths, sharing quiet. No questions, no answers, just time. Later that day, Harlan caught it looking at the fire again. Not just watching it burn, studying it, remembering it. Maybe fearing it. He wondered what it had seen burned. Wondered how many of its kind had walked through flame because they didn't know what else to do. He watched the way it traced the edge of the blanket with one thick finger. The gentleness of it. The way its shoulders rose and fell with awareness. This thing was not instinct alone. It had history, memory, maybe loss. That night, Harlan didn't light the stove. He opened the window just a crack and listened to the pines. They didn't whisper, they didn't sway, but something, somewhere, breathed with him. When the wind changed, he knew it wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning. The first shot rang out just past dawn. Sharp, distant, echoed once through the ridge before the forest swallowed it. Harlan didn't move. He just stood by the stove, coffee cooling in his hand, eyes narrowed toward the window as if trying to see through the mist still clinging to the tree line. Another shot, closer this time, not aimed but testing. It wasn't hunting season, wasn't target practice either. He set the cup down slow. The creature was awake in the stable, breath shallow, limbs still stiff but alert. It had heard it too. Footsteps in snow sound different when they belong to men with guns. They don't pad, they stab. Harlan could feel it in the way the bird stayed quiet, in the way the dog down at Simmons' farm 2 miles off hadn't barked once all morning. The woods weren't quiet. They were listening. He walked out to the porch, didn't bother with the coat, let the cold sting his neck and face as he scanned the clearing. Frost clung to the split rails of the fence like bone dust. Smoke barely rose from the cabin chimney. A stillness had settled over the land, the kind that sat on your chest and made breathing a conscious decision. He saw them after noon. 3 figures along the lower ridge, moving slow, deliberate, weaving between pine trunks with rifles slung across their backs and deadness in their posture. Clyde Rucker was in the lead. Same goddamn jacket, same black Stetson with the grease line around the band. He hadn't changed a bit in 15 years. Always looked like a man on the verge of throwing the first punch, even when no fight had been offered. Harlan turned back inside, locked the door, though he knew it wouldn't matter, and went straight to the back room. Dust lay thick across everything there. The windows hadn't been opened in a decade. In the corner beneath a tarp, he found it. The old Remington, wrapped in burlap and regret. It still smelled like sweat and metal. He didn't chamber around, just held it in his hands and stared for a long time. October 10th, 1989. Clyde's here. He brought others. It's not about hunting. It's about proving something, that this world still belongs to him. I don't want to pick this gun up again, but I might have to. The creature stayed low that day. Didn't move much, just watched him. Eyes following every motion, every breath. There was a tension now between them. Not fear, not anger. Something deeper. Like both of them knew something was coming and neither of them wanted to be the one to name it. That evening, Harlan walked the perimeter. Found 2 snares along the fence line, both fresh. The wires still warm from hands that had bent them. A third one hung from the low branch of a spruce tree near the edge of the clearing. Crude, designed to break a neck, not catch, not contain, just kill. He cut them all down. Back inside, he laid the wire traps on the kitchen table, stared at them for a while, then tossed them into the stove, one by one. The metal screamed, curled black, and folded in on itself like claws in retreat. The next night it got closer. Harlan was asleep on the couch when the banging started. Wood on wood, not fists. He shot upright, heart hammering against the inside of his ribs like it wanted out. Grabbed the lantern, stepped into the dark. The stable door was wide open. The blanket he'd laid over the creature was in the snow, soaked and trampled. The lantern light caught footprints, booted, deliberate, fresh, and then blood. Just a little. Not enough to say someone had died, but enough to say someone had tried to. He followed them 50 yards to the tree line before he found it. One of Clyde's dogs, dead, neck twisted, spine half severed, eyes open, no bullet holes, no gashes, just broken. Next to it, barely visible in the half-melted snow, was a shred of jacket fabric, dark blue, Clyde's color. Harlan bent down, picked it up, cold and stiff in his hand. Behind him the forest breathed. He turned. Nothing there, but something had been. He didn't say a word when he returned to the stable. Just found the creature sitting inside again. Chest rising hard and slow, blood on its shoulder, a cut along the forearm, but alive. More than that, aware. Watching him like it wanted to say something but couldn't remember how. Harlan knelt, not close but near enough. "You didn't run." The creature didn't blink. "You could have killed all of them," he said. "But you didn't." It closed its eyes. October 11th, 1989. It protected this place. It didn't need to. It could have vanished. Let them burn it down. But it stayed. It defended me. I'm starting to think it's not the one being hunted. The next morning, Harlan stood at the edge of the porch and waited. He knew Clyde would be back. He always came back when he thought he'd lost control of something. Sure enough, by mid-morning, the truck rumbled up the hill, tires hissing through gravel, the engine growling like something wounded but angry. Clyde didn't get out right away. Just sat behind the wheel, chewing on a matchstick, eyes locked on the house like it owed him something. When he did step out, he didn't look at Harlan. Just walked up slow, boots crunching frost, hand never far from the holster. "You got something in that barn, Harlan?" Harlan didn't answer. Clyde's smile was all teeth and no warmth. "Neighbors said they saw tracks. Said they heard something cry out last night." "Coyotes," Harlan said. "Coyotes don't kill dogs like that." "I don't know what to tell you." Clyde leaned in, real close. Close enough for Harlan to smell the rot under his breath. "You see something? You better say so. There's folks willing to pay real money for proof. And I'm not the only one looking." Harlan didn't move, just stared back. Clyde spat in the dirt. "Be a damn shame if something bad happened out here." When he drove off, the silence returned. But it didn't feel like safety. It felt like a countdown. That night Harlan didn't sleep. The Remington stayed by the door, and the creature, for the first time, limped across the clearing to sit beside the porch. Not hiding, not afraid, just there, breathing the same air, under the same stars. It started with smoke. A thin line first, lazy and uncertain, curling over the trees like a question no one wanted to answer. Harlan spotted it just before dusk, while splitting kindling beside the shed. His hand stopped mid-swing. His breath caught. That kind of smoke didn't come from chimney fires or camp stoves. It was darker, sharper. A signal, not a mistake. He dropped the axe. The wind shifted just enough to carry the scent down to where he stood. Burnt wood, plastic, maybe something worse underneath. Something he couldn't name but had smelled once before, a long time ago, through the cracked windshield of a wrecked car while his son bled beside him in the snow. The smoke was coming from the north tree line, right past the ridge where Clyde had driven off 2 nights ago. Harlan didn't need confirmation. He felt it down in his gut, the way a deer knows it's being watched long before the rifle clicks. The creature sensed it too. It had started pacing near the edge of the clearing, slow and tense, shoulders hunched like it was bracing for impact. Its breath came shorter, nostrils flaring, eyes locked on the far trees even when Harlan called softly from the porch. It didn't turn. He didn't ask it to come inside. He just opened the door. By the time darkness fell, the smoke had thickened into a veil. The air tasted like old rubber and scorched pine. Ash drifted in slow, lazy flakes, white at first, then gray, then dark enough to look like moths in the lantern light. The cabin creaked, slow and deep, like something alive trying not to scream. Harlan lit the stove, but it didn't warm the room. He checked the locks. He laid the Remington on the table. He sat down beside it, like he was waiting for someone who'd already knocked. October 12th, 1989. I should have known he wouldn't stop at threats. This isn't about the creature anymore. It's about me. He wants to prove something, wants to drag me back into his world, burn it into me. But not this time. I'm not leaving. The banging started just after midnight. First a single thud on the side of the cabin, then two, then something cracked, wood splitting near the back window. Harlan grabbed the lantern and the rifle, breath catching in his throat, and moved slow down the hall. The smell of smoke was stronger now, no longer distant. It was inside the walls. He reached the kitchen and found the back door wide open. The hinges were torn, not kicked, ripped. He stepped outside into a world half glowing with orange. The barn was burning, not fully yet, just the roof, the western wall. But it was spreading, fast, flames licking through the timber like they were hungry for old secrets. Harlan ran, boots pounding frozen dirt, breath turning harsh and sharp as he neared the blaze. The creature, he didn't see it. He called out, once, then again. The fire cracked so loud it swallowed the name before it left his lips. And then, from the far side of the barn, it burst through the smoke. The creature, fur singed, arm bloodied, eyes wild, dragging something heavy in its right hand. Harlan froze. It wasn't Clyde. It wasn't a man. It was the dog again. Or maybe another one. Dead. Thrown aside like a rag. The creature stumbled, one knee buckling. Harlan ran to meet it. Smoke wrapped around them both, thick as grief. He reached for its uninjured arm and pulled, both of them half staggering through flame and ash, the barn groaning behind them like a dying animal. By the time they reached the clearing, the roof collapsed. The sound was like a lung caving in. The fire lit the whole sky. Trees stood in silhouette. Shadows danced across the snow. Harlan lowered the creature onto the frozen grass. It was breathing. Barely. The skin on its shoulder had blistered. Patches of fur were gone, seared down to raw flesh. It stared up at him. No rage, no panic. Just pain. Quiet pain. Like it had accepted this long before tonight. Harlan couldn't speak. He sat beside it. He pulled off his jacket and pressed it gently against the worst of the burns. The heat of its body bled through the fabric. The creature didn't flinch. October 13th, 1989. He set fire to everything. The barn's gone. The traps didn't work, so now he wants it to suffer. But it didn't run. It pulled me out. It saved me. While I stood frozen, it dragged me out of a burning building. How do you repay something like that? Morning didn't come so much as arrive slowly. The fire burned out, leaving black snow and steam curling from the bones of the structure. Harlan moved through the wreckage in silence. Found one set of boot prints near the edge. Clyde's. No sign of him, though. Just a cigarette butt and half a muddy footprint leading back toward the ridge. He didn't follow. Instead, he returned to the creature. It hadn't moved, just sat, blanket wrapped around its shoulders, staring at the charred remains of the barn like it was watching the funeral of something older than time. Harlan crouched beside it. For a long while, neither made a sound. He reached into his pocket, pulled out the old photo from years ago. Him, Rachel, and their boy. Christmas, 73. Before the accident, before the whiskey, before the weight of silence took over everything. He handed it to the creature. It looked, took it gently, held it like it understood what it was holding. Then it reached out, slow, unsure, and touched the center of the photo. The boy held its finger there for a breath and gave it back. Harlan didn't cry. He'd used all his tears years ago. But something cracked anyway. He put the photo in his shirt pocket, stood up, and looked at the ridge beyond the trees. He was done waiting. He would not let Clyde take anything else. Not this. Not again. Snow came early that year. October hadn't finished exhaling when the mountains exhaled frost hard enough to crack tree bark and silence the last of the birds. Harlan watched it fall through the kitchen window like ash from a funeral fire that hadn't stopped burning since the night the barn collapsed. The sky was iron gray. The wind didn't howl. It scraped. Even the pines looked nervous. The creature hadn't moved much in 2 days. It sat in the corner of what was left of the stable, blankets still wrapped tight around its shoulders. Its burns were worse than Harlan first thought. Blisters had broken, left raw skin beneath like exposed nerves. Infection was setting in. He could smell it now, faint but steady, beneath the smoke that still clung to everything like guilt. He boiled water, crushed more aspirin, took the last of the antibiotics he'd found behind the false wall in the pantry, something from back when Rachel was sick, meant for infections that never got a chance to be treated. He wasn't sure it would work, but he gave it anyway. Mixed with mashed beans and a bit of honey, spooned slow and steady into the creature's hand. It ate, didn't look at him, didn't have to. October 15th, 1989. The snow's early, cold enough to kill what the fire didn't. He's getting worse. Won't meet my eyes now. Every breath sounds like it's being asked for, not given. I don't think he's scared of dying, just scared he won't make it back in time. That last line had come out of nowhere. Harlan wrote it without thinking, then stared at the words like someone else had put them there. But the more he read them, the more he felt them settle, like a weight in the center of his ribs. That night, while the creature slept, Harlan cleaned the blood-stiffened bandages. The smell made him dizzy. The skin beneath had darkened, edges curling in like paper under flame. Whatever had been burning inside him now had a name, sepsis. He didn't need a doctor to tell him that. He'd seen it before. Vietnam. The back of the bus when the boy next to him took a piece of shrapnel to the thigh and bled 3 days before the infection killed him faster than the war could. He stayed awake by the fire, listening to the snow hit the window in sheets. Outside, the storm was picking up. Wind pushed hard enough to make the walls breathe in and out. Around midnight, the creature stirred, tried to stand, failed. Then something strange. It crawled, slow, deliberate, to the far wall of the cabin. The old one, half burned. The one Harlan hadn't finished fixing. The creature reached up and ran its fingers through the ash and soot, then dipped one clawed tip into the melted snow near the doorway. With a mix of mud and memory, it started drawing. Not words. Not symbols Harlan recognized, but a map. Simple. 3 vertical lines, crooked like trees. A half circle beside them. A slash through the center. A shape that could have been water, or a road, or a wound. Harlan stared at it. He'd seen that shape before. Years ago, deep in the hills above Wolf Valley, there was a place where 3 pine trees grew too close together. Locals said they were cursed. That lightning struck there twice a year, no matter the weather. Harlan had found the spot once by accident. He'd gone up there to drink, back before he'd quit, and passed out by the largest of the 3. When he woke, the bottle was gone. But something had wrapped a pine bough around his wrist like a bracelet. He hadn't been back since. The creature pointed at the map, then at the window, then at the wound on its shoulder. Then it looked Harlan in the eye. Harlan nodded. October 16th, 1989. He wants to go home. Not escape, not run. Go back. And I don't think he means just to visit. Whatever he came from is there, or waiting for him. Maybe always has been. The snow was still falling by morning, but Harlan packed anyway. Canned food, rations, 2 jugs of clean water, the last of the fire-starting blocks, and a wool blanket too worn to sell but too thick to throw out. He wrapped the creature's wounds in gauze from the hunting kit, layered old shirts over its chest, cut the legs off his second pair of jeans, and tied them like sleeves to keep the wind off. He built a sled. Nothing fancy, just a flat board, 2 long rails, and rope. It would have to hold. He looked at the burned-out shell of the barn one last time. Didn't feel like home anymore. Didn't feel like anything. By midday, they were moving. The trees swallowed them quick, like the forest was impatient to take them back. Harlan pulled slow, 1 step at a time, careful not to jolt the sled. The creature didn't speak, just watched. Blinked every so often like it was recording every branch, every stone, every shift in wind. The sky kept darkening. Afternoon turned to evening without warning. They camped near the edge of the southern ridge, beneath a cave cut into stone like a mouth that had given up talking. Harlan lit a fire small enough not to be seen, big enough to thaw fingertips. The creature curled against the wall, breath short but even. Harlan stared into the flames. Didn't speak, didn't move, just listened. And somewhere in the trees, for the first time in days, the wind didn't sound angry. It sounded like it was calling something home. They started moving before the sun rose. Not because they had energy to spare, but because the wind had changed. It had a bite now, sharper than cold. Like something further down the mountain had turned its face toward them. Like time was running out, and both of them knew it. Harlan pulled the sled in silence. His boots crunched through ice-crusted snow, legs aching with each slope, each bend. The rope bit deeper into his palms as they climbed, the grade steeper than it had any right to be. His breath stayed in front of him, rising in huffs that looked too much like smoke, too much like that night. The creature lay bundled on the sled, barely moving, 1 arm tucked tight to its chest, the other hanging limp. The wound had worsened. Harlan had smelled it that morning when he changed the bandage, sweet, sick, like meat left too long out of the freezer. They crossed the high ridge by noon. The clouds hung low enough to touch. Sunlight spilled through in fractured beams, catching the snow like glass shatter. Below them, the valley unfurled like something exhaled long ago. Ancient, cracked, lined with fallen logs and sharp black rock. And just past the far rise, Harlan saw it. 3 trees, towering, twisted, too close together for anything natural to grow that way. Their trunks weren't straight. They leaned inward, like they were whispering to each other. At the base, a clearing. Round, silent. And at the center of that silence, a wide patch of ground that looked untouched. Even the snow there had melted, though the air was still below freezing. Harlan stopped. Let the sled rest. The creature raised its head. Their eyes met. Then it nodded. He pulled the last 100 yards slow, each step deliberate, the way a man walks toward a grave he dug himself. The rope strained. The sled groaned. The trees loomed closer. Not menacing, not welcoming either. Just waiting. At the base of the center tree, Harlan lowered the sled. His legs gave out. He sat in the snow, shaking, not from cold, not entirely. The creature reached for the ground. Fingers curled against moss that had no right to be green this time of year. It pressed its palm flat, then both palms. Then it pushed, and with everything left in its body, it stood, not tall, not proud, just upright, like it was remembering how. It took 1 step forward, then another, stumbled. Harlan rose and caught it by the side, supported its weight, felt the heat radiating off its fevered skin through the shirt, through his coat. They moved together, one dragging, one holding. They stopped between the trees. The creature knelt, placed both hands flat on the ground, then tilted its head toward the sky. A sound followed, not a howl, not a cry, something between the two. Low, steady, echoing off bark and snow and bone. The kind of sound that made the air pause, that made the birds stop mid-flight. That made Harlan feel like the mountain itself had just remembered something it buried. He knelt beside the creature, laid a hand on its back. It was burning, skin boiling under his palm. The wound had gone black around the edges. It was dying. He knew it. It knew it. But it didn't fight it, didn't fear it. It had come home. October 18th, 1989. He knew the way without seeing it. That clearing, those trees, they were part of him. And now I can't tell if I brought him there, or if he brought me. Either way, I'm not the same. He stayed with it through dusk, watched the color drain from the sky, listened to its breathing slow. The creature never laid down, just stayed seated, hands planted on the earth, eyes fixed forward. Then, sometime after nightfall, when the stars blinked open one by one over the tree line and the cold dug its teeth deep, the creature turned its head, looked at him, held that gaze, and exhaled. Long, final, and then nothing. No collapse, no drama, just stillness, like it had stepped out of its body without making a sound. Harlan reached out, touched its shoulder. It didn't move, didn't breathe. He didn't cry. He just sat there beside it, listening. Because he could swear. For just a moment, he heard something move through the trees behind him. Something big. Not threatening, just passing, just returning. He looked over his shoulder, but there was nothing there. Only snow falling soft again, and a breeze through the branches that sounded a little like goodbye. He stayed with the body until morning. The night passed without sleep, the air too cold and the silence too wide to close his eyes. He watched frost form slowly over the creature's arms, crystallizing along the edge of fur and flesh like the mountain itself had reached out to hold him. Harlan didn't move. He barely breathed. There was no need for words. Nothing left to explain. When the sun finally rose, it came in quiet, slow streaks of amber through the trees, bathing the clearing in a soft warmth that didn't reach the skin but sank somewhere deeper. The three trees stood like monuments now, guardians around something older than story. He stepped forward and placed a hand on the creature's shoulder. Still, heavy, at peace. He didn't bury him with tools. There wasn't time. The ground was frozen too deep, and his body couldn't carry the effort. So he did what he could. Gathered pine boughs, stacked them over the body one by one. He didn't cover the face. Left that visible to the sky. Let the wind see him. Let the stars remember. A grave not of stone, but of memory. He placed one last thing. A pine branch, twisted and blackened by fire, set upright at the head like a marker. It looked small, but it stood. October 19th, 1989. I couldn't give him a name. Not really. Not in the way we give names to things we think we understand. But I knew what he was. A witness, a keeper, a reminder that some things choose not to be seen, not because they fear us, but because they know what we do with the things we claim. Harlan turned from the clearing, the trees fading behind him like they were part of a dream folding in on itself. The walk down was harder than the climb. His legs gave out twice, once near a frozen stream, again beneath a ridgeline that had been steady on the way up. His knees buckled and his hands sank into snow that smelled of moss and old rain. He didn't curse, just breathed and kept going. The sky darkened early that day. Clouds hung low. Not angry, just tired. The way old men get when they've carried too much for too long. When he reached the cabin, it didn't look like home anymore. The barn was still just bones. The porch was covered in ash and snow, but he didn't feel grief. Just a quiet certainty that this place had done what it was meant to do. Inside, the fire was gone. He didn't relight it. Just sat at the kitchen table and laid the photo flat on the wood. Rachel, the boy. Smiles older than memory. He touched the boy's face gently with one finger, then pulled the sopping piece of notebook paper from his coat pocket and placed it beside the frame. He hadn't written anything new, just carried the last entry all the way home. October 20th, 1989. I didn't save him. He wasn't mine to save. But I stayed, and maybe that was enough. Maybe staying is all any of us can really promise. The next morning, he packed a small satchel. Only what he needed. Jerky, matches, the map the creature had drawn. He tucked the photo into the lining, looked around the cabin once, touched the frame of the door like it had something to say. Then he walked into town. Cold Pine hadn't changed. Main Street still had one light blinking at the corner of a hardware store that hadn't sold hardware since '86. The gas station still smelled like dust and gasoline. And Clyde Rucker's truck was parked outside the diner, as if he'd never left that booth. Harlan didn't go inside. Didn't need to. He walked right past. Let the man see him. Let him wonder. Let him live with what he didn't get to own. By the time Harlan reached the post office, he was shaking. Not from cold. From something looser. Something breaking free. He sent a single envelope to the Denver Wildlife Office. No name, no return address. Inside, one photograph, taken from the edge of the ridge, grainy but clear. 3 trees, a figure hunched beneath them. A moment before the final breath, he didn't wait for an answer. He walked back to the cabin, not fast, not slow, just steady. He didn't rebuild the barn, didn't fix the fence. But he planted something. Right where the sled had first stopped. 3 pine saplings, close together, too close. He watered them every morning, spoke to them sometimes, never told them why. October 27th, 1989. I don't know if the world deserves to know, but maybe the trees do. Maybe that's why they never look away. That winter came heavy. Snow climbed the cabin steps and stayed there. Coyotes kept their distance. The woods quieted in a way that felt less like fear and more like reverence. And every so often, in the deepest part of night, Harlan would wake up, heart pounding, eyes wide, not in terror, not in pain, but because something outside was breathing. Slow, deep, measured. He never opened the door, just laid there. Let it pass. Let it be, because whatever it was, wasn't gone. Some stories aren't told because they're true. They're told because they touch something deeper, something most of us keep buried beneath the noise of daily life. A whisper that says, there's more than what we see. That maybe, in the spaces between loss and survival, there's still wonder, still connection, still room for redemption. This wasn't a story about monsters. Not really. It was about silence, the kind that grows in the wake of grief or shame, or choices we can't take back. It was about finding something ancient, something untamed, and realizing it had more humanity than we often allow each other. And sometimes it takes stepping beyond the boundaries we've built, between wilderness and home, past and present, logic and mystery, to understand what it means to truly see. Because the wilderness doesn't judge. It remembers. It holds secrets not to punish us, but to remind us, we're not alone. We've never been. We are creatures of memory, of second chances, of quiet reckonings. And when the world strips away all the distractions, when there's no signal, no shelter, no one else to blame, we're left with a simple question. Who are you when no one is watching? In that stillness, sometimes we change. Or maybe we return to who we were always meant to be. So perhaps, at the heart of it all, this story was never about proving something existed. It was about honoring what we've forgotten. The quiet courage to stay when running feels easier. The radical act of kindness when anger tempts louder. The deep, aching hope that no matter how far we've fallen, we can still be found. If that stayed with you, if something in these shadows and snowfall stirred a part of you long asleep, then maybe that's the real point. Not the creature, not the fear, but the reminder. There is still good worth protecting. There is still mystery worth respecting. And in the deepest woods of our hearts, there's still a path back, if we're willing to walk it. Thank you for taking that journey with us. If this story moved you, stayed with you, or made you pause for even a moment. We'd love to hear what it meant to you. Feel free to leave a comment, share your thoughts, or tell us what part of it lingered. And if you want more stories like this, strange, human, haunted, and hopeful, make sure to follow the channel, give us a like, and subscribe. It helps us more than you know. We'll be back soon with another tale to share. Until then, stay curious, stay kind, and don't forget to listen when the woods go quiet.